I was left for dead near the banks of dry Willow Creek, with nothing but blood in my mouth and dust in my lungs. They called me cursed, said my womb was hollow as a winter gourd and my heart twice as cold. My husband had died in a mining collapse, and within a year, so had the baby that barely made it out of me. After that, I wasn't a person anymore, just a bad omen. The whipping came on a Sunday. They said I had spoken ill of a deacon's wife. I hadn't, but no one needed truth when they had tradition. I was dragged from my shanty by men I once fed during hard winters, lashed with a length of braided rope, and dumped like spoiled meat into the wild. My mouth wouldn't scream. My bride wouldn't let it. So I swallowed pain and kept my eyes open even as the world blurred. That's where Reuben Kane found me. I didn't see him at first, just heard the creak of leather and the soft muttering of a child. Thought I was hallucinating, but then a shadow fell over me and a man's voice said, "Lord above." He wasn't alone. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, stood beside him holding a boot like it was treasure. Her brown eyes blinked wide when she saw me. "She's broken," she whispered. Reuben didn't say a word for a long moment, just knelt in the dust and touched my wrist like it might vanish. I remember the smell of tobacco and pine soap. He finally said, voice low, "I'm gonna lift you. I don't fight me, all right?" My mouth was dry as bone, but somehow I croaked out 3 words. "I didn't cry." He paused, then nodded. "I believe you." That was the first truth I'd heard in months. He carried me to his wagon like I was something worth saving. The child, Ruth, held my hand the whole ride back, humming off key and petting my hair like I was her dog come to life. I don't remember much after that, except warmth, darkness, and a single bowl of chicken broth that tasted like mercy. By morning, I was in his home, quilts over me, salve on my back, water by my bed. Reuben sat by the fire, sharpening a knife, not like a threat, more like a habit. He looked at me with the calm of a man who'd seen worse. He said, "You ain't got to talk. You just got to rest." I tried to speak, but all that came out was a dry laugh. Rest. I didn't even know what peace felt like anymore. But I closed my eyes. For once, I wasn't afraid of what would come next. He didn't know it yet, but he just saved a woman the world wanted forgotten. By the time my back began to knit and the bruises on my ribs turned from violet to yellow, word had spread across town. Reuben Kane had taken in Naomi Haskett, the cursed widow, the barren blight. I could feel it in the way birds flew off too fast when I stepped outside, in the way silence curled around our porch like a noose. People didn't speak to Reuben directly. They just let the silence rot loud around him. Reuben didn't flinch. He kept tending his land, milking his cow, reading Psalms to Ruth by lantern light. Never once asked me for my story. Never asked for thanks. "Folks talk," he said one morning as we shelled beans side by side, "but truth don't need a parade." That night, they came. 3 men on horseback, faces in shadow, voices slick with false courtesy. They didn't knock, just sat on their horses like judges in the dark. "You got something in your house that don't belong, Kane." Reuben didn't rise from his chair, didn't reach for the rifle. He just looked at me and then back at them. "I reckon you wrong. You can't shelter sin forever. "Then I reckon you best not be out past sundown, friend." They didn't expect that. Didn't expect a quiet man with a child on his lap to be steel-spined. They rode off, but not before one spat on the porch. Reuben didn't wipe it, just looked at me and said, "Still want to stay?" I stood slowly. My legs still ached, but I didn't tremble. "I didn't ask to be saved," I told him, "but I won't run again." That was the first time I saw a smile cross his lips. It didn't reach his eyes, but it was something human. From then on, I became a fixture in his home. I swept, I cooked, I read to Ruth from a Bible missing half its Psalms. I stitched curtains from an old flour sack. At night, I dreamed of being dragged again, only this time I fought back. But every piece has its price. One afternoon, I went to draw water from the well and found a dead crow nailed to the post. Its beak was broken, its wings torn. Ruth saw it before I could hide it. "What does it mean?" she asked. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say it was nothing. But Reuben stepped up behind me, plucked the crow free, and dropped it in the fire without a word. "It means we're still breathing," he said. That night, he slept by the door, knife under his pillow, and I sat in the rocker with Ruth asleep on my lap, staring at the fire until the crow was ash. They wanted fear. I gave them silence. They wanted me to run. I stayed. Whatever they thought I was, cursed or not, I wasn't weak. Not anymore. When I told Reuben I was going to town with him, he didn't argue. He just looked up from mending a fence post and said, "You sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." Ruth clapped her little hands like I'd announced a festival. The town hadn't changed. Same dusty storefronts, same crooked church steeple trying to scrape heaven. But something was different the moment my boots touched the ground. Folks paused. Shop doors hung open a second longer. Eyes followed like rifles tracking a deer. Reuben walked beside me, calm as a sunrise. Ruth held my hand, skipping like she didn't feel the weight of the glances. At the mercantile, Mrs. Gallows turned her back when I said good morning. At the bakery, the man slid the bread toward Reuben without a word, eyes locked on me like I'd spat in the flour. I stood still, spine straight. I didn't shrink, but I felt it. The heat behind my ears, the prickling at the base of my skull, the silent verdict. "She got no shame," someone whispered as we passed. "She's a blight, always was. She bewitched the witherer." That last one stung more than I expected. Because I wasn't a witch. I wasn't powerful. I was just tired. Outside the dressmaker's, Ruth tugged on my hand and she whispered, "Mama Naomi." The first time she ever called me that. Why are they mean? I swallowed hard, looked her square in the eyes. Because they've been taught to hate what they don't understand. She frowned, deep and thoughtful. "That's dumb." "It is, but we don't run from dumb." She squeezed my hand tighter. Reuben overheard, I think. His face didn't change, but when we got home, he laid out a fresh piece of cloth on the kitchen table, soft calico, not yet cut, and said, "Thought maybe you'd want to make something of your own." He never said where it came from, but I recognized it. That cloth came from the back corner of the dressmaker's shop, the one she said she'd never sell to me. I didn't ask how he got it. I just stitched it into a new dress that week, wearing it like armor. From then on, I went to town every Sunday, head held high. I walked with Ruth beside me and Reuben a few paces back, not like a guard, but like a witness. They didn't stop staring, but I stopped caring. Once, outside the church, Wade Lockett stood blocking the path. Big man, heavy mustache, one of the three that came to our porch that night. "You are not welcome here," he said. I stepped forward, close enough to see the twitch in his eye. "Then you'll have to move me yourself." He didn't, and I walked right past him, Ruth's small hand clutching mine like a promise. Let 'em talk. I'd already been whipped, broken, and left for dead. What more could their whispers do? We were married in the small clearing behind Reuben's home, with only Ruth and the preacher's wife in attendance. No fanfare, no guests, just a quiet vow exchanged beneath a sky that looked like it wanted to cry but couldn't. Reuben didn't say much that day. He never did, but his eyes met mine as we stood by side, and in them I saw something I hadn't known in years. A future. Not a perfect one, not a safe one, but a future made with calloused hands and deliberate kindness. Ruth had gathered wildflowers for my hair. Most had already wilted by the time we said I do, but she was so proud I wore them anyway. That night we ate stew by lamplight. Reuben raised a chipped cup of cider and said, "To survival." I replied, "To joy." He blinked like he hadn't expected that word from me, but he nodded. The joy didn't last long. 3 days later, we woke to the smell of smoke. Reuben ran for the barn barefoot, Ruth clinging to me and crying as the orange glow lit up the early dawn. By the time he got the door open, the goats were gone and the rafters were collapsing. Nothing we could do but watch it burn. On the fence post, tied with twine, hung a crude doll made from dried corn husks. Its belly was stuffed with ash. Someone had painted its face with chicken blood. I knew what it meant. Wade's message was clear. You may think you're a wife now, but you'll never be a mother. Reuben said nothing, just stared at it for a long time before handing it to me. He asked, "What do we do?" I took the doll, dug a hole by the edge of the woods, and buried it. I said, "We let it rot, like the man who made it." Reuben placed his hand on my shoulder. No words, just weight, just warmth. The next day, Reuben asked if the goats would come back. I said, "No," softly, "but we'll get more, and maybe chickens too." She smiled. "I'll name them after you." We rebuilt the barn with help from no one. Reuben worked by day, I hammered by night after Ruth slept. My back ached, my hands bled, but I had never felt stronger. Not when they whipped me, not when they left me, not even when I stood in front of Wade at the church. The barn went up beam by beam, roofed in stubbornness and sweat. One evening, Reuben caught me staring out across the field, watching the wind run through the wheat like a thief. He asked, "You thinking of leaving?" I shook my head. "I've already left once. If I run again, they win." His mouth twisted into the barest smile. "Then we stay." And we did. Through the whispers, through the second dead crow left by the well, through the broken eggs on our porch and the sugar spoiled with lye. Each cruelty met with silence, each insult buried like the doll. They called me cursed, but I had a husband, a child, and a roof we built with blistered hands. If that was a curse, I'd take it every time. It was called an inquiry, but everyone knew what it really was, a public shaming. The preacher said it was about clearing the air, said there were concerns about the influence I had on Reuben and Ruth, said it was better to talk openly than let rumors fester. But the second I stepped into that little clapboard church, I knew the truth. This was a trial dressed up in Sunday manners. They'd moved the pews aside, set up a single chair in the center, like I was livestock to be judged. Women stood with arms crossed, men with their hats in hand, pretending this wasn't about fear and hate. Even the school teacher showed up, the one who once offered me dried apples after my husband died. She wouldn't meet my eyes now. Reuben tried to speak first, but they told him to sit. "This ain't about you, Cain," Wade Lockett growled. "This is about the woman you've let poison your home." He looked right at me when he said it. Poison. I didn't look away. The question started soft. "Naomi, do you believe you've brought unrest to this town? Why didn't you leave after the incident at the creek? Do you think it's wise to raise a child given your nature?" Then the sharper ones came. "Did you seduce Reuben out of loneliness or spite? Did you curse the Lockett boy's mule? Have you lain with spirits, as some have claimed?" That one got a few gasps, a few coughs, even a few nods. I waited for the silence. Then I stood. "You want a story? Here's one." I told them about the day my husband died in that shaft and how the church never brought a single meal. I told them how, when my baby died 2 weeks later, I wrapped her myself in my last clean sheet and dug the grave with blistered hands. I told them how no one came, not a casserole, not a prayer. I told them about the men who dragged me from my home and whipped me while their wives watched from behind curtains. And still, I said, my voice steady as stone, I didn't cry. Reuben's hands were clenched in his lap. Ruth sat beside him, fierce and small and unblinking. "I didn't come here to stir anything," I said. "I came here to heal, to survive, to build a home with a man who saw me when none of you did. You think I'm cursed? Fine. You think I'm barren? I am." I looked at Ruth. "But I am not empty." Silence fell, long and thick. Even Wade didn't speak. The preacher cleared his throat. "This meeting was meant to—" "I'm not finished," I snapped. "You all want me gone so you don't have to look at what you did. But I'm still here, and I'm not ashamed." I walked out before they could say more. Reuben followed. Ruth ran to catch my hand. The church door creaked behind us, but no one called us back. That night, as the wind howled through the newly built barn and the fire cracked low, Reuben sat beside me and said, "You didn't have to say all that." "Yes," I said, because silence hadn't protected me, but truth might. After the inquiry, the town changed, but not in the way I'd hoped. The whispers didn't stop. They just grew quieter, more venomous behind closed doors. But now they knew I wouldn't flinch, and that made me dangerous in their eyes. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Reuben held it like it might bite him. It was stamped with the seal of a circuit judge. Someone had reported the incident at the church. Likely the preacher's wife. She always had a guilty conscience wrapped in pearls. The letter said the judge would arrive within the month to conduct a formal investigation into acts of unlawful violence and harassment. It meant someone, finally, was paying attention. Reuben tucked the letter into the Bible. We just need to hold the line a little longer. I nodded, but I could feel it. So could he. The storm hadn't passed. It was just circling. A week before the judge was set to arrive, it happened. Wade came to the house in broad daylight, drunk on rot gut and rage. He found the preacher in town first, beat him so bad he'll never see right again. Then he found Ruth, walking home from the field with a bucket of blackberries. She didn't eat anything at supper, said her belly hurt. By morning, she was burning with fever, mouth dry and lips cracked. The berries were poisoned. Someone had laced them before she picked them, and I didn't have to ask who. We sat up with her all night, Reuben on one side, me on the other. She thrashed and cried, calling out for her mama and for me, her voice scratchy and scared. "I'm right here, baby. I'm not leaving," I whispered, wiping her forehead with a wet cloth. She finally slept just before dawn, breath shallow but steady. Reuben didn't say anything. He just went outside and started digging a hole. Not a grave, a trench, a boundary. He ran rope across the property line, hung old horseshoes on posts, sharpened every tool he owned. It wasn't for show. It was for war. I walked out to him that evening, carrying a plate of cornbread and coffee. He was fixing the lock on the shed door. "You think he'll come back?" I asked. Reuben didn't look up. He knows what's coming. "You gonna kill him?" "I might." I stood there a moment, wind tugging at my skirt, the scent of smoke still clinging to the barn boards. "If you do," I said, "don't bury him here. He don't deserve our land." Reuben finally met my eyes. "Neither did you, but you made it yours." That night, I sat by Ruth's bed while she slept, her breath rasping soft but alive. I held her hand and prayed not for justice, not even for safety. I prayed for enough time for the judge to come, enough time to show my daughter what survival really looked like. Because we were done being victims, and if Wade wanted to bring hell to our door, he'd best be ready to walk through fire. The judge rode in just after sunrise, his horse lathered and his coat dusty from the trail. He didn't look like much, thin, grizzled, face carved from stone, but when he stepped down and shook Reuben's hand, I saw a flicker of something rare in a man of the law: resolve. Word spread fast. By midday, half the town had gathered in the open clearing behind the church, benches dragged from the sanctuary, the pulpit set up like a stage. The judge called it an open testimony hearing, but to me, it felt like something holier. This time I wasn't put in a chair alone. Reuben stood beside me. So did the preacher's wife, her hand in a sling, her voice shaken as she described how Wade had beaten her husband senseless for protecting the wrong kind of woman. I told my story again, from the creek to the poison. I named names. I met every eye in that crowd. My voice didn't tremble. Wade was there too, standing off to the side like he owned the dust beneath him. When I spoke of the whipping, he laughed. Woman's always been poisoned, he said loud enough for the judge to hear. Ain't nobody made her suffer more than her own sins. The judge looked at him coldly. You just confessed to ordering a beating, Mr. Lockett? Waite's smirk faltered. I didn't say that. You just did. Murmurs rolled through the crowd like thunder. For the first time, I saw cracks in their unity. A young man near the back stood up. Tommy Gallows, the blacksmith's boy. She never did nothing but survive, and we turned our backs on her. His mother hissed, tried to pull him down, but he stayed standing. One by one, others rose. A storekeeper, the woman who once refused to sell me cloth, even the school teacher. I should have done more, she said softly. Wade turned red, furious. Y'all really siding with her? The judge stood. I've heard enough. In that instant, the weight lifted, the silence broke. The judge ordered Wade arrested on charges of assault, attempted murder, and conspiracy to harm. When the sheriff hesitated, the judge raised a brow. Or shall I add obstruction of justice to the list? Wade didn't go quietly, but he went. And the rope they'd once used to hang dead crows on my porch, that day they used it to bind his wrists. Reuben took my hand, rough and warm. You did it, he whispered. No, I said. We did. Ruth watched it all from the edge of the crowd, holding a little stuffed hand I'd sewn from old fabric. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. Just like her mother. The preacher's wife came to me as the crowd dispersed. You're owed more than justice, she said. No, I replied, just peace. And for the first time in years, I felt it, stirring, small, fragile, but real.
Peace doesn't come like a trumpet. It comes like a porch creaking under morning dew, or a child's breath rising steady through a fevered sleep. It came to me not all at once, but in the spaces where hate used to live. After Wade was hauled off, things got quiet. Not friendly, but quiet. That was enough. The school teacher started nodding at me in town. The butcher began wrapping our meat a little tighter. Nobody apologized outright, but they stopped crossing the street to avoid me. That, too, was enough. Reuben and I went back to the work of living. Ruth's fever broke, and with it, something else did, too. She grew lighter, laughed more, even started calling me Mama like she never knew I hadn't always been. One afternoon, I found her feeding scraps to the new hens, muttering, "You eat good now. Mama Naomi watches everything." I pretended not to hear her, but I smiled until my jaw hurt. We planted early that spring. The wheat came in thick and gold, the tomatoes proud and fat. Reuben built a new shed with his own 2 hands, and I carved my name into the lintel beam. No one would ever erase it again. Then a letter came. It was addressed to me, my full name, Naomi Haskett, written in careful hand. The return was unfamiliar, but the contents weren't. It was from my sister. I hadn't seen her since the day I buried my daughter. She wrote that our mother had passed, that she'd left behind a plot in Dust Hollow, the place we were born. My sister said she wanted me to come, not out of guilt, but so we could bury the old woman proper, together. I didn't cry when I read it, didn't scream, didn't smile. I just packed a small bag, kissed Ruth's head, and told Reuben I'd be back in 2 days. Dust Hollow hadn't changed. Still smelled of pine sap and sorrow. My sister met me by the chapel gates, her face worn but open. We didn't hood at first, just looked at each other like we were trying to decide if the other was real. She asked for you, my sister finally said, near the end. I asked for her, I replied. We buried our mother beneath the only blooming dogwood in the county. Afterward, my sister and I sat on the porch of the old house we used to share, drinking coffee from chipped mugs and watching the sun go down. She hated weakness, my sister said. In us, in herself. She hated being reminded of her own pain, and I was a mirror. We sat in silence, not angry, not bitter, just two women looking at the ruin they were born from and choosing not to carry it forward. When I returned home, Ruth came running out with dirt on her cheeks and a dandelion in her hand. "Mama," she cried. I knelt and scooped her up. Reuben watched from the porch, arms crossed, quiet as always. That night, as I folded the dress I wore to the funeral, I ran my fingers over the hem, over the stitches I'd once sewn in defiance. I remembered who I was before all of this, before the hate, before the fire. "And who's that?" he asked. "A woman with nothing left to prove." He just smiled and kissed the top of my head. I wasn't cursed. I wasn't barren. I was home. And I was finally free.